Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. We will go ahead and get started. I appreciate everyone being here, and I apologize for having to reschedule the call. So I appreciate everyone being here. As always, this call is being recorded, and once we get it processed, we will send out the recording so you can have it. Just a couple of things that I want to touch on this morning before we open it up to any questions. First, the Family Centered Supports and Services Semi-Annual Reports. I think we have most everyone's. There's a couple of outstanding ones. So we're working with the counties to get access to that information. So I appreciate everyone with their timely submissions, specifically with the weather, the two very cold days where a lot of offices were closed, and also then the snow statewide on the following Monday. So I do appreciate everyone getting the data in good measure. So I appreciate that. What we'll do, as always, is we'll start to analyze the reports. Get the data put together. We will then work on the need services grids, combine all of those, put those together, and then ultimately combine the two reports for the semi-annual report that I hope to have out, if not by the end of this month, fingers crossed, then by early to mid-March. As I said, we're waiting on a couple of counties to get theirs in and finalized, and we've also worked with one county to update their numbers. So as soon as we get everyone's in, I can start to put the data together and we can get the report out to you. But I would look for that sometime late this month, early next month for review. So I need to have it ready to review with the deputy directors at their next meeting in early April. So we'll get that out to you. So I appreciate everyone getting that in. Before I move on, then any questions then about the semi-annual reports? Was there any outstanding questions from that? Before I move on, I don't want to bypass anybody's questions if they have a specific question about this.
Chad, will you or Jenny send out the link so that I can have a printable copy of what I submitted?
So yeah, just email Jenny.
Okay.
And then what she will do is she'll provide you with a PDF copy of the report.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, the same that we did last year for the annual report. If you want a hard copy, just email your applicable regional coordinator, either Amy or Jenny, and they will get that for you. Any other questions about this? Okay. So moving on, there was a couple of questions that came up at the regional meetings about the state fiscal year 2020 OCBF application. I sent out, I think it was earlier this week, if I'm not mistaken, the days are running together, that we've set up a series of webinars over the next 3 weeks to walk through the application process, basically creating a dummy report in the SurveyMonkey. So that you can kind of get a sneak peek of what the platform looks like prior to submitting your applications. So we had those scheduled. I anticipate those being maybe no more than an hour, depending on questions. It's not going to take us that long to go through that. And then we'll also review the budget form and then answer any questions that you may have about the application. So we have dates that we set up over the next 3 weeks. So if you want to, or if you have questions, please log in. It's not required. I will send out the link to those calls the morning of the calls, so look for those, and then we can go from there. So, but again, they're not required, they're not mandatory, but if you want to look at it, if you have questions that you want answered, we can take time on those webinars to do that. But a couple of general questions that came up at the regional meetings. One of those being the non-mandated rosters. and then how that relates to the Early Childhood Collaborative committees, which is the next bullet point there if you can see my slides. Just for clarification purposes, the Early Childhood Collaborative committees were a construct of the Ohio Department of Health for Help Me Grow. So it was a requirement prior to the department establishing rules. So it was a policy that was under the Help Me Grow requirements for ODH. So if your county was utilizing Help Me Grow, you needed to have an Early Childhood Coordinating Committee. It just so happened that the Early Childhood Coordinating Committee dovetailed nicely into the requirements of the County Family and Children First Councils to have an advisory committee on early childhood efforts that's in statute. So there is a specific statement that the counties must address a community collaborative around early childhood issues in relation to IDEA. So those things started to dovetail very nicely with each other. When ODH went from their policies to rules process, the requirement of the County Family and Children First Councils for Help Me Grow to have an EC3 committee was removed. It was no longer a requirement of the department. So as such, many of the County Family and Children First Councils disbanded that committee. Now, not all. There are probably maybe, I don't know, 10, 12, a dozen or so counties that still have that committee in place. So since the ORC language and the requirements of the EC3, mainly what it was designed to do, who was designed to be at that table, and how it was being reported, that our office made the decision that someone from that committee needed to be a mandated member on the County Family and Children First Councils. So that went a long ways to try to bring that community collaborative to that overall collaborative table under Family and Children First. So when ODH removed the requirements of the EC3s, that effectively eliminated the requirements that that person, a representative from that person, had to be on the County Family and Children First Councils. Since it was a construct of ODH, they had every authority to say, we don't need this anymore. And then we, as an office, did not take that up as saying, you councils need to continue to have that. What we have said is if you do disband your EC3 councils, that you have to find another way to meet that community collaborative for early childhood issues. You have to find another way of meeting it. So if you're going to disband your EC3, you needed to find another way to meet that legislative statutory requirement. So with that being said, since that was no longer a mandated body, we no longer really had the authority to then mandate that a person on a body that no longer exists in many counties needed to sit on the Family and Children First Council. So over the last few years, we've been taking a step back to remove that requirement from the attendance requirements of the County Family and Children First Councils. So we made this step in the 2019 application to remove it from the application proper and then ask counties, if you do have an EC3 member still on your Family and Children First Council via a functioning committee, to include those on the non-mandated member list, which is the same exact guidance that we're providing for the 2020 application. So if you are a county that still has an EC3, you still have that EC3 representative sitting on your Family and Children First Council, you can put that on the non-mandated member roster. If you do not have a EC3 committee, you do not currently have made a decision on how that statutory requirement is going to be met, I recommend that you have that communication with your council. That conversation needs to happen, as that still is a statutory requirement. So that's the reason why the EC3s are no longer a mandated person, mandated body on your Family and Children First Council. If you continue to have one and they continue to sit on council, that's great, and we provide you with a mechanism to report that. But with that body no longer being in existence due to the elimination of that requirement, we cannot mandate that that position remain. So that's why those EC3s have been removed from the roster. So any questions about that? But I just want to reiterate that having that EC3 helps you meet the statutory requirement, but if you do not, there really needs to be a conversation locally how that's best addressed. Now, most of the County Family and Children First Councils that I'm aware of that do no longer have the EC3s, they have some sort of committee. That's either a standing committee or that it's a standing agenda topic on their Family and Children First Council meetings. They're larger meetings, which is fine. We're not mandating, we're not recommending, we're not suggesting how you meet that requirement, but you need to if you do not have that conversation regularly, or you do not have a group of people that are coming together to talk about early childhood related issues, specifically with development, then you need to have that conversation with your councils. So the statutory requirement remains. How you choose to meet it is at your county's discretion.
Chad?
Yes.
Is that requirement spelled out in the Ohio Revised Code?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I just had the code up yesterday. Let me see if I can get to it real quick, and I'll give you the exact location. Of course, it's never there when you need it. All right, here we go. So it is. So it is in section B, B to C. So it's participation in the development of a countywide, comprehensive, coordinated, multidisciplinary, interagency system for infants and toddlers with developmental delays and their families. So it's B to C is the statutory language.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions about that? Okay, and then the other thing came up yesterday, and I thought I would touch on it today. There was a question about the DD superintendents being able to have a designee to the Family and Children First Councils. They're only able to provide a designee if they are the superintendents of more than one board. So if your superintendent is also a superintendent for another county, then for one of those county Family and Children First Councils, a superintendent can provide a designee to sit in their place. So that's the only opportunity that the DD superintendents have to identify a designee is if they are indeed superintendents for multiple county boards. So I wanted to clarify that as well. So the three bodies that are able to provide designees, just to recap it and to bring it full circle, are the county commissioners. If it's not the president can send a designee. The health commissioner can do a designee, and the DD superintendents. The only other person that's really kind of not specifically defined is a representation of the city administration. That can be a lot of different people. It doesn't necessarily have to be the mayor. If the mayor wants to designate the president of council, or there's another city administration position that's ill-defined. But those are the only ones that are able to send a designee per Ohio Revised Code.
Chad, so if, like, in my council, the superintendent does not attend, but he sends a designee, so that just means that her vote doesn't count. Is that correct?
Yeah, the vote doesn't count, and they can't count towards the attendance.
Okay.
But if they want to send somebody in their stead to collect information and bring it back, they're more than welcome to do so. But that person does not have any sort of authority or right to vote.
Okay.
Now they can share information. They can participate in the conversations. They can take information back. They just can't. They can't have the formal official authority that mandated member would have.
Okay.
Yep. Any other questions about this? Okay. So the next topic, there was a couple of questions that came up at the regional meetings about CAN's recertification. Our office hasn't required recertification since the initial training, and a lot of that it was because so many people got trained at so many different times, and keeping track of that was going to be problematic. Because there are just ways in which counties receive training, and they receive training outside of Family and Children First, and so on and so forth. So we have held off on any requirements for CAN's recertification. So what we're doing moving forward, starting on July 1, so moving into the next fiscal year 2020, that at that point in time, most everyone who have been trained has been trained for at least a year at that point. So at some point during state fiscal year 2020, we're going to require CAN's recertification. So we're looking into potential options of whether that's going to be state supported or not, and I don't have a decision on that yet. There are conversations ongoing, but that point in time, I can't have an answer for you yet. So hopefully by the time we get to the next fiscal year, so we would require you to be recertified during 2020, that I'll have an answer for you. But I just wanted to put that on your radar. We haven't required it previously, but following best practice and following the evidence-based model of the CANs, that we do have to have the users at least annually be recertified. So we're talking about how it could potentially be paid for, and then two, whether we want to make the decision to do it annually or whether it's going to be biannually. But once those decisions are made, we'll make sure we get that out to you. But I at least wanted to get it on everyone's radar that is using the CANs, that we will have some sort of recertification process state fiscal year 2020.
How much is the recertification?
If I'm not mistaken, it's $12.
Okay.
So if you were certified in February, you need to recertify, or is it okay to hold off until next year?
Well, yeah, so sometime during state fiscal year 2020. So if you just got certified this month, then we would ask you to then next February, which is halfway through 2020, to get recertified again.
But if we met the deadline that you had established for being certified last February...
Yeah. I'm asking you to do it at least sometime again in 2020.
Okay.
Yep. And again, our decision to delay the recertification is because there was no organization into how and when people got trained. So when new people come on board, we say, okay, we need to get trained in CANs, and we gave you vouchers. So having that tracked over the hundreds of vouchers that we provided was just too problematic for us to keep track of. So I'm putting it on your radar. In 2020, the vast majority of you will need to get recertified in CANs. I'm guessing 99.9% who is utilizing it at some point in state fiscal year 2020 is going to have to be recertified. So we'll try to figure out ways in which, if there's going to be state support for that, and then if it's going to be annual or not, we still haven't made those decisions. But at least want to put it on your radar to look for that for next year.
If we have a provider who was trained earlier on, are there vouchers available now for them to be recertified?
I'll have to look. There may be one or two left. As I said, we're at this point in time we're not purchasing any more for the fiscal year, but that doesn't mean that I won't have allowances available to me to do it for next fiscal year.
Okay.
But we're also going to go through the process here at the end of the month to ask if you have been given a voucher that you haven't used yet. So potentially if there are more out there that are outstanding, that we can then get them recycled and used again. So we'll have that available to us. I don't know how many. I can go through the vendor that we purchased them with. They can run a report and tell me how many is outstanding. And we tried to keep track of who we attached those vouchers to, but sometimes it was for a county for new employees, and I don't know whether that new employee actually used it or not. So we'll go through the exercise again at the end of the month to figure out if we do have any outstanding vouchers left that we can then reutilize for that if counties want to then get recertified sooner. But I just don't know. They could all be used, and we don't have any left, except for the few that I do have. Bless you.
Sorry, Ted.
So, any other questions about the cans? All right, then the final thing I want to touch on before I open it up for questions is we're having conversations with our state partners here at Mental Health and Addiction Services that are utilizing Fidelity EHR for their grants as well. So the Engage 2.0 and the State Youth Treatment Implementation grants. I don't know what the total number, some 16 to 20 counties are involved in those efforts. And one of the things that we've been looking at are ways in which we can then really identify data that's applicable to Family and Children First, data that's applicable to the Engage 2.0 effort, and the data that's applicable to the SYTI grant. So I'm going to kind of start to talk about this in many venues moving forward, is that for those of you who are utilizing Fidelity EHR, there is a specific question that isn't required, that we're talking with Fidelity to make a requirement. But we're asking the County Family and Children First Councils to look at this. And the issue is we need to identify the service area in which your youth are being entered into the EHR system. So why? So how are they getting there? So there are a couple of different areas in which this information can be handled. So when you go into the youth record, the demographics, down near the bottom, there's a question called service area, and it's a drop-down menu. So there's 4 choices there: Family and Children First Service Coordination, Family and Children First Wraparound, Engage 2.0 Care Coordination, and the SUD Care Coordination, which is the State Youth Treatment Grant. We're asking each of the County Family and Children First Councils to identify the service area in which those youth are being serviced. So if they're coming in through the mobile response and stabilization services through Engage 2.0, we ask you to identify Engage 2.0. The same thing for SYTI. And then if your county has wraparound and service coordination, designate between the two. If you have one or the other, then you designate that as well. So there's a couple of different locations to where this question is identified. One on the youth record at the bottom of the demographics, right above your green enrollment button. And the other is in the referral form builder, about 4 questions down, under the county jurisdiction is service area, and it's the same 4 choices. So in one of those two areas of the youth record, we're asking you to identify what that service area is based on who you're providing services for. So if you're doing it for Engage 2.0, please do that. If you're just Family and Children First, please do that as well. So that's helping us with the other two grants to make sure that we're not pulling data that's not applicable to those grants. So it's just a kind of a housekeeping thing. It doesn't do anything other than identify the youth on how they got to the point for service coordination or wraparound. So it's just us housekeeping on the back end to make sure that we're pulling relevant data based on what our needs are. So that's all that is. And I do continually receive questions about from counties about Fidelity EHR. You can start anytime. I can continue to work with you to get acclimated to the system. We're looking at bringing Fidelity back in for another round of training this summer, probably early August, under the new contracts for the next fiscal year. So that'll be available to you as well.
Chad, I have a question about the drop-down menu.
Sure.
When you come in through mobile response, you want us to select that on the drop-down menu, and then you also want us to select whether they're going to be in wraparound or service coordination. Is that correct? So we'll choose two in that drop-down?
For MRSS, just choose one. Just choose the Engage 2.0.
Okay.
Because then that alerts us to how to group the data, and then we can then search deeper into that data to determine one or the other. But just to identify yourself, then identify and flag that case as being coming through MRSS is really what we're needing.
Okay.
Yeah, so just in one of those two areas, within the youth record itself or then within the referral form, there's a couple of different opportunities to answer that question. We just ask you to do one or the other.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, can you tell me those real quick? I was trying to log on so I could see it, and it took me a while to get to the page. So if I'm on the youth, what's the drop-down menu? Where's it at?
So if you're in the youth record, go to the demographics tab.
Okay.
And then at the bottom, there's a drop-down list for service area.
Okay.
It's right above the green enrollment button. So you will have your kind of the grayed out box of entered by, the date record was created, last edited on. It's right above that. It says service area.
So do you want us to go back to all of our active kids and save that, adjust it?
If you could, please.
Okay.
Yeah. We're trying to figure out ways in which we can have it required moving forward, but we want to make sure that it's in a place that every county is touching. So not all the counties, all the users for Fidelity go through the longer referral form builder. They go to the short form. So it's hard to make it required there. So we're talking about having a conversation about where this question is best positioned. So if it's not this position or it's not in the referral form builder, where does it need to be? Because we need to have this information to make sure that we are accurately reporting data to those who need it. So, but yes, if you could, for those of you who are utilizing Fidelity, it'll take you 2 seconds to identify, and we would appreciate that. Thank you very much. So again, if you're wanting to use Fidelity, you can enter it in any time. If you have staff that's turned over and they need to get trained, just contact me and we'll get you up and running and making sure that they have what they need to move forward. And if you have any questions at any time, if there's any bugs that you run into, please don't hesitate to give me a call and let me know, and we'll get that fixed for you. So I want to make sure, check on my notes. So that's everything that I wanted to talk about this morning before opening up. So any questions that you may have about what we reviewed this morning or something that we haven't talked about, now's your opportunity to ask.
Hi, Chad.
Yes.
This is Sandy Smoot from Warren County. On the item that you talked about where there's going to be, 3 different opportunities to talk about the application, are those going to be sequential, or could someone, like they might miss the first one, but it would still be instructive to join the second one?
Yeah, they're not sequential, so each of the webinars will be the same. So it's just a review of the SurveyMonkey itself, so you can get an idea what it's going to look like once you get in there, and then a review of the budget form. So each of the 3 webinars will be exactly the same.
Great, thanks so much.
Yep. Yeah. So if you can't make the one next, next Monday, then you can hit the one on the following Tuesday. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. If not, I appreciate you hanging in there with the reschedule, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.